Now that I think about it, I might be the only person in the world to design their own miniatures and wargame without ever painting a mini. And that has to change. I'm definitely not the first person to play a wargame without ever having painted minis, and not the first person to 3D print models without ever painting one. But to design, sculpt, and print your own minis and design a wargame without ever painting one? I know, that's insane, right? But no, no buts. No, it's pretty strange. This was something I really needed to fix. So I did the only reasonable thing I could imagine and bought a box of 50 paints and put together a whole rack for those paints before getting started. Yeah, totally reasonable. This box here was the only box that I could find online in Japan with a big set of dropper bottles in it, and those are something that I've come to adore. The closest hobby shop that sells these is easily a 2-hour train ride away. Plus, comes with a little tiny tipped brush that I tried out using, and this painting guide. Now, I had already painted a few models before, like my Scavcat and Scrappy, and I'd watched a ton of painting videos on YouTube, so I felt pretty confident. Let's see how it went. I started with the Scavenger Veteran model that I made in my last video. Now I finally had something that I felt was worthy of the title First Painted Mini. Plenty of little details and character to work on, and a style that matches my game's setting. If you want to follow along with this little painting video and prove how much better you can do than me, then you can find that model down in the link below. I had already printed a batch of 6 test prints, so I went through and chose the one that I thought turned out the nicest. It has a little layer line on it, but at least the headpiece printed fully. I took my time cleaning up the supports and stuck them down to a little MDF cutoff that I had left over from making my paint rack, using a little bit of poster putty. Then I primed him using some basic gray primer from the hobby shop, and followed that with a coat of basic black and a zenithal highlight with white. See, I can use the fancy lingo, so I must know what I'm doing, right? Right? These were just cheap dollar store spray cans I had on hand. I may have gone a little overboard with the white, but it got the job done, and the details definitely popped more after that. Next, it was time to choose my paints. I tried to match my concept art as close as possible and chose a couple colors for each main component. Then, got to work. I started off with the pants, using a coat of army green. This would be the least noticeable area on the figure, so I figured I'd start here to test out the paints and the new brush. The pants were looking pretty good, so I moved on to the cloak. That was very straightforward, just painted the whole thing. Nice. Next, after fiddling with my camera angle, I started working on smaller and smaller details, starting with plate mail metal for all of those metal plates. Then moving on to oak brown for the handle and the boots and the hat, and leather brown for the straps, and then barbarian flesh for the fleshy bits. It's almost as if these colors were chosen exactly for these purposes. Destiny. And with that, the base coat was finished. I was feeling pretty proud of myself at this point and confident, so I jumped straight to the wash. Which was apparently a mistake. I didn't realize at the time that the washes included in this box are not quite the same as the other acrylic paints. After letting it dry, I began to notice cracking on the surface, especially noticeable where the wash was able to pool up, like the cloak. It left a cool little effect, but I didn't think that a cracked cloak was particularly realistic, so I let it dry thoroughly and went back over the cloak with a second coat of the base color. Fortunately, it was relatively thin, so it still came out looking a little darker in the crevices, and I decided to just not touch it again. Maybe I should have read the instructions included in the box. I mean, there's even a nice little section titled How to Use Quick Shade. But, oh well. Sparing just a few moments to second guess my actions, I started in on some edge highlighting. The metal plates and the edge of his spire hook got a nice little line of shining silver. The cloak got a few streaks of
Skeleton
mummy robes to show where the light would hit it, and the darker brown bits got a touch of the lighter brown, the one I used on the straps, the leather brown, though it was barely even visible anyway. The straps are just so tiny that I left them alone, and the pants, well, didn't really have any edges to highlight. Finally, I got to the point that I was most excited about, adding just a few little touches of beautiful red rust. Which I'm surprised to see, actually, they don't have any instructions for, so I guess I'm in the clear. And that, my friends, is the finished piece. Glamour shots. It will hardly win any awards, except perhaps most bizarre order of operations. But hey, it looks pretty nice, and now at least I can call myself a miniature painter. Or at least someone who has painted minis. Mini. Yeah. Let me know how I could have done better in the comments below, and if you think that this is a pretty good paint job for a beginner, leave a like on the video. Also, this video is not meant to be a review of the Army Painter Mega Paint set, but I think it was actually pretty nice. I love dropper bottles, and I like the included brush. It's probably one of my nicest brushes, but that's mostly because I usually buy them from the dollar store. And even though the washes didn't quite do what I expected them to do, I definitely could have just read the guide and solved that problem, I'm sure. Now, this is probably far too many different paints for anyone who's just getting started, but for me, living in Japan, the closest place that sells miniature paints, especially miniature paints in dropper bottles, is at least a 2-hour train ride away. So the money that I save in traveling costs is more than made up for here. And it's really nice to have the freedom to just choose whatever colors I want to for each miniature. I'm excited to try out some Warlock Purple and Necrotic Flesh on some miniatures that I might not have otherwise painted that way. You may have noticed that I didn't actually get around to making a base for this guy yet, and that's because I'm actually planning to make a full diorama for him to go on, which I've already gotten started. If you want to see how that turns out, also my first time trying to build a diorama, then stick around here on YouTube. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter for something more up to date, and head over to diluvianchronicles.com if you want to check out more about the background of this project and get your hands on a copy of the rules to Spire Seas. Ding ding, there it is. Well, that's it for today. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Freedom to choose whatever colors I want to in the future, throwing in some Warlock Purple. Warlock? Warlock. Ooh, I was right. Warlock purple.